Welcome, everyone, to Building a Modern Privacy Program, a three-part webinar series hosted by Ketch. This is the third session of a three-part series, each one diving into a key part of the privacy program. And today we're talking about data subject rights fulfillment. So let's go ahead and jump into it. To introduce our team here, we have myself, I'm the marketing lead at Ketch, and then joining me today we have John Brennan. John, would you care to give a quick introduction?
Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you all. I am the head of the solutions engineering team here at Ketch, and I'm looking forward to discussing data subject rights with you.
Wonderful. Thanks, John. So for some quick background, in case anyone on the line is not familiar with Ketch, we're a data privacy software platform. We help businesses and brands to simplify privacy ops and use responsibly gathered data for business growth. We're headquartered in San Francisco, but we do have a London office and customers across the US and Europe. So customers often choose to work with our team because of the fresh approach we take to modernizing data privacy compliance. And that leads me to what we're here to talk about today, which is best practices and recommendations for modernizing one of the most foundational components of your privacy program, subject rights fulfillment. So let's go ahead and get started. The chat and QA functions are open. We absolutely welcome any questions, comments you have throughout. We would be glad to make this interactive if any of you would like to. Our flow for today, we're going to talk a little bit and sort of set the stage for talking about DSARs with the privacy program maturity curve, tell you a little bit about the way we like to think about maturing your privacy program and where it's going. And then I'll turn it over to John and we'll talk about improving your DSAR approach to save costs and complexity with a view into the Ketch platform and how we actually treat DSARs, including critical outcomes of a strong process. And maybe I'll actually pause here and ask for your input, John. I have DSAR here. You sometimes see DSR. You see all sorts of tweaks to this term, right? Are we talking about effectively the same thing when you see all that stuff?
Yeah. DSR, DSAR, DSAR are fundamentally the same things. Just depends maybe on the jurisdiction and which particular term they use. But when we say those words, they all mean the same thing.
Perfect. Thanks. So let me go ahead and set the stage with a few slides talking about this, what we call this privacy program maturity curve. When we think about where privacy is today, where programs are today, and then where we need to go, we're seeing a really interesting shift here at Ketch for the why in the motivation for maturing your program. And that why is the consumer. This consumer is emerging as a distinct and motivating factor. Businesses we see are often struggling, hamstrung by the complexity and privacy, and it's stopping businesses from crossing this chasm to catch up with their customer, who is already, these individual persons in their consumer role are already rewarding responsible data practices with brand loyalty and revenue. And so for a business to catch up with their consumer, it may sound trite, but the real objective here is trust, right? When our customers trust that their data is safe with us, that will exert that transparency, they expect to feel safe working with our business. That's really where we see the real benefits from investing in a privacy program that practices responsible use of data, because our customers will really see that value and then hopefully share that with their pocketbooks, right? We'll see that brand loyalty and revenue go up. A question we often get here is, well, how do you know that, right? Do consumers really want that transparency? Do they really want the control of data? We believe they do, and we had that hypothesis last year. And so in order to kind of prove that out and see if there's real data to support it, we did actually conduct a study. We partnered with a global media research firm, Magna Global, to conduct a study of over 5,000 consumers across the US and UK. We asked for two areas of focus when we asked the questions for the study. What do people think about data privacy? And then two, how do people's opinions actually impact business data practices, right? And all under the hypothesis that we thought we want our customers, businesses, to have a bigger motivator for focusing on maturing their privacy programs than just regulatory compliance, right? Checking the box. Is there a bigger reason to think about automating and enhancing some of our privacy processes, DSARs being a perfect example? So as a result of this study, and I just want to share a couple slides to set us up here of the results, we found that in the UK, 67% of consumers highly value their data privacy. What I mean by that is, we showed them kind of quadrants, right? Bottom, middle, top of issues, asking them if they value social and ethical issues. And 67% of UK consumers place data privacy in that top box. They rated it an 8, 9, 10 on a scale of 10. That in and of itself is, kind of interesting, but it's especially interesting when we looked at it compared to those two other stats there, right? We asked consumers, okay, do you highly rate sustainability, diversity, and inclusion? And it was much lower than data privacy. So what we see here is that consumers really think highly of data privacy being an important ethical and social issue for them, more so than others, meaning that there's potential value in brands touting their data privacy practices, their responsible data practices, publicly as a social value, right? We're used to seeing marketing teams brag about sustainability, about diversity, inclusion, but what if we did the same for privacy? Consumers seem to indicate that would be welcome. And then one last key stat I want to share from the study that really, I think, points to the potential as treating data privacy as a kind of fuel for revenue is that 81% of consumers told us that they see the value in sharing their data with brands, meaning that consumers understand the value exchange and are okay with giving their data to a brand in exchange for some kind of benefit, whether that's a discount, whether it's more personalization. Consumers understand that this is the way the digital world works, if you will. And if you're practicing and using their data responsibly, they're okay, more than okay, to reward you for it. So there's real potential here. At the end of today's presentation, I'll pop up the QR code. So if you'd like to download the full study, you can. But I bring this up because it's a real statistical support that maturing your program towards this broader benefits of the consumer in mind has real potential revenue impact for your business. So back to the first half of that chasm, right? We talked about the business and the business undergoing that complexity and the challenges. And I just want to point these out because this is sort of where many firms are starting today, where there's a lot of regulatory, people, and system complexity that we need to solve for in order to actually kind of make progress towards this broader vision of the consumer. So we see a lot of regulatory complexity that we're all familiar with, right? Growing across the globe. Although many regulations have elements in common, there are small differences that require more programmatic solutions. People complexity is huge, both internally from a stakeholder standpoint of the people involved in a privacy program, but also externally, right? Our consumers have multiple digital IDs, different data subject roles, and DSARs, again, are a great example of how do we connect all those things to make sure that we're accurately reflecting consumers' choices in our systems. Speaking of systems, the average business has sprawling systems today, at least 40 to 60 different SaaS applications and systems, posing another big challenge for businesses for data discovery within those systems, and then also, again, enforcing people's choices across those systems. And then we also see, honestly, lackluster first-gen tools. Many of the early tools that came to market for data privacy, often that 2015, 2016 range, were very modular and weren't built to solve for this fragmented, sprawling regulatory landscape we have today that really requires interoperability. So we're dealing with quite a challenge from a business perspective in multiple streams here. The way we think about this at Ketch is within this concept of a capability maturity model. So we've developed this sort of simple 3-stage outline of helping our customers assess where they are today and then figure out the next steps to take. So we call it our capability maturity model to help you really identify where you are in your privacy journey. And the way we think about it, there are these 3 stages of growth: programs, programmatic privacy, and data stewardship. So many folks today, we find, are kind of between these first 2 stages where they're still a little bit in programs, what we would call, many manual processes, still a little bit operational silos, not completely treating privacy as a team sport across the organization yet, but this is a key fundamental stage, right? It's essential to checking the box on compliance, making sure your regulatory compliance standards and policies and assessments are up to date. And then moving from there, once we've kind of set that foundation and programs, into more automated, scalable, and connected privacy tool sets. And so what you see in this slide here is that we think about these 4 swim lanes across the maturity journey. often mapping to those initial complexities, right? With data, risk and compliance, tools, people. And this is how we help our customers identify what attributes respond or characterize your business today. It's never black and white, right? Often we see businesses who are maybe further along in treating privacy as a team sport, for example, that swim lane in the bottom, but still pretty limited from a tech perspective in that second to the bottom swim lane. And so we help our customers assess where they are today and then assess based on specific use cases, where do I need to go from here? And the reason DSARs are a great example of moving along in this journey is because that second stage, programmatic, where we have the scalable and connected privacy tool sets, DSARs are a perfect example of a use case and privacy challenge that really require some system connectivity and really different systems and stakeholders speaking to each other to really get the job done. And so with that, I want to hand it over to John to really talk about DSARs as a specific use case and how we approach them at Ketch. So John, you want to take us away?
Yep, I'm going to jump in right now and take this over. So thank you, Colleen, for turning that over. So as Colleen mentioned, what we want to do is talk about what does this look like in the product. And so to kind of set that stage, I wanted to mention a few things here. Number one, DSARs automation is a key piece here, right? It's very expensive to, as Colleen mentioned, the first gen approach, which is really that manual type of response and saying, hey, what's the quickest way we could do something? People were just throwing bodies at the solution. The real challenge there is that becomes very expensive, very time consuming. And so what we provide within Ketch is the ability to automate, but then also scale as you grow. So DSAR volumes are going to grow. Nobody's arguing that. As they continue to grow, we're going to continue to support our customers to help them automate and reduce the level of effort and spend and reduce the errors that they're having when they're running through these programs in a manual process. Also, this granular cell level control is really important because now every bit of data across your entire organization, you can have access to, you can manage it, you can effectively leverage it for data subject rights requests in a very effective manner. And then also being able to set this up in a very easy way is critically important. Not only is automation important, but being able to define what does this look like? How do I get to my data in a very easy way? So our marketplace allows you to connect all your different internal and external data systems in a very functional, easy way. And then finally, being able to report on that. So it's one thing to actually run through the process of handling the requests, but how do I have intelligence into it? How do I know what's happening? How do I know it's working? How do I know where there might be challenges? So being able to report on that is also critically important. So what I want to run you through now is a demonstration of what does that look like. So where I start off with, which is really the data subject's perspective, what do they see? And what you see in front of me is kind of what you might see typically, which is somebody has to fill out a form, provide the information, select the type of right. Now, the first thing that's important to note is that the type of right is based on the jurisdiction they're coming in from. So the various different regulations that are out there, for example, in Europe, you have GDPR, affords the data subjects a different set of rights than if you're maybe from California and you're under CPRA. So we will know where that person's coming from, and therefore we will provide them the appropriate rights for their jurisdiction. The other thing you'll see too is that a lot of organizations have multiple ways that they want to trigger these requests. What you see in front of you is a pretty typical web form. This is one way that the process can be triggered. There could be other ways too. There could be somebody calls into a contact center and they want to request their information be deleted. That can trigger the same type of workflow process. If you're on a mobile app and you want to kick that off, or maybe you're on a gaming system or something like that and you want to trigger these types of requests, all of these entry points into the system are valid today. They're happening today, and the Ketch platform allows you to use the same single platform to support all those various different entry points. So what I've done here is I've just pre-filled this form to save you some time watching me type in information, and I'm just going to submit this. And what's going to happen though is a couple things. Number one is we're leveraging, in this example, HubSpot for our CRM. This is one of the systems that when a data subject right request comes in that we need to work on. And as you saw in the form, I'm using my identifier here, this email address to find my information and ask to be deleted. But then what's going to happen is that we're going to go into a workflow. And so Ketch will actually receive this request. It'll determine based upon the jurisdiction, based upon the type of request. In this case, it was a delete type of request. and it's going to kick off a specific workflow. So let me walk you through what that workflow looks like. And when we talk about automation, this is what we really mean by that, is really defining the process so that a technology system can handle the request and connect it to all the different various systems and do all the work, versus what you see with a lot of first generation tools, which might be a workflow, but if you go a level deeper, what you're actually seeing is just a message being sent to somebody, say, hey, can you work on my HubSpot system and remove this person's information? We don't really see that as automation. We see that as a first generation response to something that needs to be done, but it doesn't really ultimately help your business. So we want to really fully automate the process, meaning completely hands off. You don't have to touch anything. So the first step you'll always see in these type of data subject rights requests is identity verification. It's obviously critically important that you recognize who the person is, you verify they are who they say they are, and you also verify that that individual is a valid customer and that valid customer information. So Ketch provides a number of ways that we can do identity verification. You can do your standard email verification, where it's a kind of send an email message to the data subject. They'll receive a link, give them a code, they'll enter the code, and it'll take them to what we call our privacy portal. Our privacy portal is where the data subjects can see the status of the request. They can see any communications that might be coming in from your company. So you can have subject conversations, let them know you're working on it. Do you have any questions about it? So there's an asynchronous communication capability built into the privacy portal. And it's ultimately where, if they do something like a data subject access request, that they can receive the information about them and get it there from a secure location. So that's a one mechanism. Another mechanism for identity verification is connecting to some third-party services that we have partnerships and integrations with, where they may ask more clarifying questions. For example, here's 4 addresses, which is one you've lived at in the last 4 years. So it gives a little bit deeper type of verification. And then finally, if your organization has an existing identity verification process in place, we can hook into that, we can connect to that and leverage that. There's no need to recreate it if it already works. So it gives you a lot of flexibility in how you can identify and verify the data subjects that are making those requests. So once we've identified and verified the individual, what we'll then do is determine, okay, where is their data? So prior to this, we would have done a data discovery and classification activity with our platform as well, that will automatically go out, find where all the information is for your customers, where's their personal identifiable and sensitive information, and we'll notify, or we'll acknowledge that information, classify it, and then understand where that data is, so that when you go and execute one of these requests, it'll actually go to the right systems and find the right information. Like I mentioned, we have something like HubSpot here for our CRM. So using our marketplace, which is effectively where all of our integrations are that we have built with and for all of our customers, that's where they all exist. And we have a little over 400 integrations today from various systems. We break down those systems into 2 different types. One we call internal, which may be things like a data warehouse or systems that are internal to your organization. And then we call external. These are typically SaaS-based products that we have built integrations to, HubSpot being an example of one of those, where that information is stored that we can go and get them. So fundamentally, we are able to go and act on and understand and discover any of your information, whether it's internal to your own systems or it's some kind of external third-party system that you might be leveraging for data and information on your customers. So once we actually go through and process that information, you can see that there's 4 different types of systems we're going to go out and connect to here. We have the external system, something like an Airship for, say, maybe mobile marketing. We've got a HubSpot for your CRM. And then we also have an internal system. In this case, we might be using something like a Snowflake or Redshift for a data warehouse. And what we want to do is actually go and act on that data itself. So again, these are one of our integrations that we have within our marketplace. And what we typically see with customers is that when they say a delete, a lot of times it's not actually deleting the entire record of the individual. What they're really doing is anonymizing or de-identifying the individual. That way you can still run your analytics, you can still run trend reports, but you cannot identify the individual in those reports and those analytics. Way we do that is we allow you as an organization to define how do you want to handle that personally identifiable information. That could be hashing or masking, or really if you wanted to delete the record, you could. So this gives you a lot of flexibility in how you can interact with the data and how you can manage the data in a very powerful, easy to use way. And then finally, fundamentally, we've gone through and we've connected all the systems, we've grabbed all the data, we've changed all the data, updated it, hashed it, masked it, whatever it might be. And then we're going to send a data subject an email to say, hey, this has been completed. We've finished it on such and such a date. A lot of organizations too sometimes want to have a bit of a check and balance. Maybe they want to have somebody to finally be notified, yep, this was completed, or maybe they want some kind of final approval step to be done. We also have the ability to have a manual step in there to make sure that you have full control over this. So this workflow is fully definable by you as an organization. As you can see on the left-hand side, we've got a number of intelligence built into it. So you can have different decision gateways. We have a number of different activities that you can add to these workflows. I mentioned things like identity verification. There's also approvals that I talked about that you can send an email to somebody, have them work on something and prove that it was done. And then also all of our integrations that I mentioned in our marketplace are sitting in here as well. So it's really just a very easy to use drag and drop interface for this. Then what you're able to do is once those requests come through, we also have what we call our queue. So you remember that when I kicked this demonstration off, I started off with a right of erasure for GDPR. And now I can see how this is actually flowing through the system itself. So this will provide you insight into our kind of reporting perspective. This will provide you insight as to what's going on here. So things like how many days left to work on it. So you can set thresholds to alert you if maybe this hasn't been worked on or hasn't been completed and it still has 3 days left before it's deleted. And maybe you want to make sure you don't run past the time period when it's due. So you can have these thresholds for due dates. You can see what is the latest action that's required, any activities, when it was kicked off, the jurisdiction. Then we can also look at the workflow. So this is actually, I showed you the workflow definition, but this is the actual workflow for that particular request that's flowing through. And you can see that it's gone through all its various stages and steps and that it's set up as completed. And now it's finally waiting for a final step to interact with this individual. So what I'm able to do is actually pick this one up and say, you know what, this is actually completed. It's done. I'm going to check that box, hit resolve, and now the workflow will be absolutely completed. Now that last step I showed you is purely optional, just an example of how you could have manual intervention if you need. Some organizations are ready for full automation. Some organizations desire full automation, but maybe a few systems require a little bit of a manual intervention. So we have different areas of flexibility that you can go to, whether it's fully automated or somewhere along the lines of full automation. And then I mentioned earlier also about subject communication. So if you're communicating back and forth with your subject in that privacy portal, you can see where the communications here are. And then also anything in this communication is part of the workflow process. And then also part of the audit logs, which is the last piece I want to jump into real quickly here, is I want to show the audit log of this particular request. So we have a number of different identifiers upon which we can find people in the system. And if I search on that ID that I used earlier, you can see on the right-hand side now that here's when I invoked that right, here's what it was requested. So if there are a number of rights that were happening in the system for this particular individual, they would show up here. So give me a full detailed audit to the individual. And then we also have the ability to see an audit of the entire system itself. So you can see things such as how many systems are in, or how many requests are in the queue, how many have been completed, how many are on time. Are there any trends happening? You know, we talked to a lot of organizations, and depending on things happening in the world, it could drive significant requests of volumes to go up because something happened or some legislation was passed in their part of the world. And so this gives you a good sense of how this is trending. Again, this is moving away from a manual effort of painfully knowing how many requests you have to now more of a monitoring process where you're really sitting back and watching it happen and work and just understanding and investigating and analyzing trends of your business. And then let me go back to the final stage here, which is the actual record that I had, the contact record for this individual in HubSpot. If I hit refresh, you will see that now that record is gone. So now we've acted in real time, no human intervention required, acted on this particular record and submitted and committed to and executed the actual data subject rights delete request for this individual. So let me wrap it all up here, kind of jumping down to one more slide. So the value of this really, just to kind of cover off on this, is really the reducing the cost of processing the requests. We talked to a lot of organizations. This is very timely, very expensive for them to do. So reducing the cost by automation is really critical. And then also improving response times. There's always a deadline. And so nobody ever has enough time. So being able to meet those deadlines is critically important. And then really what this does is this increases the trust relationship between you and your customer. They know that you value their data, that you value the relationship with them. And by honoring these requests in a timely manner and in a correct manner is critically important to that trust relationship. And then ultimately, really where we're getting at here is ensuring the compliance of your environment and your privacy platform. So we want to make sure that that is paramount to what you're doing, is ensuring that you're compliant with the jurisdictional rights and regulations of where your business is operating. And then I'll wrap it up, pass it over back to you, Colleen, for the final slide here.
Thanks, John. Can I ask on that last one, how do you advise customers when it comes to deciding if they're ready for DSAR technology? Is there sort of a tipping point when it comes to DSAR volume that you're getting? How do you help customers think about that?
Yeah, a lot of times when we talk to customers, one of the things that they respond with is like, well, our volumes aren't very high right now. I think we can do it in this kind of manual way. And that may be okay for a period of time. But what we start seeing is when you start getting into the 10, 15 or more kind of a month, a number of requests, that's where companies start realizing the real pain of this. And this is very time consuming. So it usually isn't just one person working on this. It's to your team sport comment earlier. This is really affecting the whole organization. That's the legal folks, the IT folks, maybe sales and marketing, could be third parties. And so they very quickly realize when it hits about 10 or 15, that becomes untenable. They also then start quickly realizing that they're now running the risk of becoming non-compliant, which is very, very challenging. And then ultimately they're going to negatively affect the customer relationship. So we tend to see that magic number around 10 to 15 a month is where people start feeling a lot of pain and start wanting to realize they've maybe waited too long.
Got it. Okay, great. Thank you. Well, we're at the top of the hour here, so it's time to wrap up. Thank you all so much for joining us. If you are interested in seeing more of the Ketch platform, just talking about your use cases, your DSAR volume today, we love to keep talking. Please send a note to Kieran. His email address is there, and he'll set you up with an introduction with our team. And Kieran will also be in touch with each of you to provide a little gift card on Ketch for your next lunch for joining us today. So thank you all again for spending time with us, especially those of you who've joined us for the entire series. Really appreciate it. And thank you for spending time with Ketch. So with that, let's go ahead and wrap up. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and have a good one. Talk to you soon.